I never want to advocate for somebody shutting themselves down. However, sometimes you have to learn how to be an elephant without scaring the mice.
I understand. And yet there's still an incongruence now, or I would say a discrimination between the different groups. If we think about the gender fluid people, they're still allowed to present themselves in a shocking way. But if a woman does it, not anymore.
Yeah. When you say if a woman does it not anymore, like women are not allowed to be shocking?
They're not as they're not as accepted in a corporate environment. I'm talking about a corporate environment.
Okay, I gotcha.
Particularly.
Yeah.
While gender fluid people are promoted with the way they look,
right.
They're accepted the way they look. But if a woman shows up a bit differently, she would be out of line.
Right. She would be seen as out of line.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to the need to advance the line. So it's not accepted. So then why is it not accepted? To start to question those parameters. Why is this not why are companies only hiring from Harvard? It doesn't mean what it used to mean, right? In the States, for example, why are women not allowed to be more feminine in their expression? Why do we not look at leadership from this more balanced perspective? So when you say it's not accepted, I think there are still barriers that we face, but I think that because we still face them, this is the time to stand up and show up a little bit differently. And yes, there are women that are going to be sacrificed for that. But I think we need it, right? We need to stand up and continue to fight because there's no other way, right? We're just going to revert. And right now we're in the middle of a very intense backlash.
What do you mean by that?
In the sense of the line has advanced quite far and the status quo is pushing back really, really hard.
Why do you think this
some of those advancements? Sorry, you asked me a question. I missed what you said.
Why do you think this is? Is it because of the economic situation? Because I know that I've read quite a lot of material that when it comes to deteriorating economic situations, everybody's psychologically reverting back to the traditional way of thinking, be it the way you dress, be it the way you do business. It's all going back to traditional.
Yeah, of course, because what happens in any learning situation is you have your zone of comfort in the center or your zone of familiarity. I hate to say comfort zone because you can be in that zone and be uncomfortable. It can feel too tight. So this zone of familiarity. And then as you grow, the next stage out is the zone of growth. But if you go too far, too fast, then you get into panic. You've stretched too far. And what happens when people panic? They run away. They run back to the familiar. They run back to what they cling on to. They run back to old structures. And I think what's happening now is we have really done a big stretch and it's contracting. But the good news about that is that at least this zone of familiar, it's contracting, but it's not going all the way back to the center. So gradually, the zone of the familiar becomes as big as your growth zone was before. And then your growth zone stretches and then your panic is farther out. So I'm not sure that it's just the economic situation, but I do think that it's because people are afraid. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of what this might mean for them. And so it reverts back to that sense of, well, I'm going to stick with what's familiar instead of being able to sit in that and go, wow, things are really changing quickly. I'm going to sit and do some reflection on what I need to do to sit and adapt to this change. So if I'm an old white guy in a board meeting and there's something going on that I'm like, oh, or there's some way that I spoke to women before that I can't do now. For example, another consultant that I was talking to had an example of a woman who very accomplished, only woman in the room, again, well-educated, very experienced, does this great initiative for the company. And one of the senior leaders says to her, "You're such a good girl." Into right? And I think it's so important for leaders who are feeling challenged right now to also hold the line, to not revert, to not automatically flee and run away back to old ways of thinking. Just like that company that I said that's tying attendance to pay. No way, man. Like, you have to be so strong, particularly if you're an older white guy. I say that, I love men. I say that with the most fondness. If you're in that position where your world is being rocked, learn to rock with it. Learn to think critically about what's happening around you. Really stop and say, wow, I'm feeling out of place. And I imagine that must be so hard and so uncomfortable for people who have been in leadership for such a long time and have understood the game for such a long time and have played the game well and been so successful in that paradigm, to suddenly have that blown open. Wow, I can't imagine how shocking that must be to their systems. And so I have a great deal of empathy for that, for the shock. And it's an incredible opportunity. The men who can step up to that, and the women who have been forced to act like men to get successful and are in those ranks of senior leadership, for those people to be able to step back and go, wow, I need to make a change. I need to do something differently. I need to look at what's going on around me and educate myself. I need to get a mentor who's under 30. If you're over the age of 40 or the age of 50 and you don't have a mentor who is under 30, you are missing out. You're gonna ossify and die. So I think
that's a revolutionary advice. I've never heard of it before, but it's genius. I love it.
Right? Like, you have to have people around you that are younger to keep you current and to help expose you. And that is why, again, with the work that I do with women in representation is so important, because everything is flat now. Younger generations have wisdom and we're listening. Older generations have wisdom and we're listening. It's not just one way anymore. The world is not one way. It's two-way. It's multi-directional. And so the sooner leaders can adapt to this new reality, the better off they're going to be.